Hey guys, Trip here. It's official, the seal is broken. After a year-long break, I'm finally back to bitching about Bethesda. And what a time did I fucking pick. I'm gonna be honest, it's been surreal watching this company run itself into the ground over the course of 12 months. But I don't want to repeat the same stories you've heard countless times before. I'm not going to spend this video lampooning the value of Fallout First, Bethesda's sheer audacity in releasing it in the first place, nor the disastrous launch of their own subscription service. Instead, I want to focus on an aspect that no one else seems to be talking about, something that we all seem to have collectively forgotten. Guys, Fallout First is supposed to be free. Now I know what you're thinking. Of course it should be free, it's an absolute dumpster fire. But that's not what I mean. I'm not making a cheeky evaluation of the quality of this product. I'm not being obtuse or sarcastic. I'm taking the reported words of Bethesda's vice president and holding the company to those words. Pete Hines is in charge of PR for Bethesda Softworks, and before Fallout 76 released, numerous sites reported on his assertion that all content would be free after launch. This is one of the many articles you can find on the subject. First off, you should read this article. Not just for the content, but just as a time capsule of how starry-eyed and naive we were before Bethesda wrung the last bits of optimism out of our souls. Here's what Pete Hines told PlayStation Magazine last year. There's always going to be new content, changes, in-game balance, whatever it takes. And by the way, it's all free after launch. All our content, there's no season pass and no paid DLCs. Now, the article quickly points out that cosmetic microtransactions will be an exception, and that their purpose is to fund the game going forward in place of any other paid content. Now, before I made this video, I had to make sure I wasn't imagining all this. I merely had the vaguest recollection of a Bethesda statement in the back of my mind, some long-distant promise of free content. So to find proof, I started in the Fallout 76 subreddit, in the hopes of finding a quote or an article or an image or something to prove that I wasn't losing my mind. Thanks to the community, I found the Pete Hines quote, but what struck me were the people trying to defend this. Take a look at the thread yourself. I'll leave a link in the description. Most of their arguments rely on semantics, particularly the definition of DLC. According to these guys, Fallout First is not DLC, therefore Bethesda did nothing wrong. Normally I ignore arguments like this, but they relate to larger problems in the industry, where consumers retrofit these grand walls of convenience, contrivance, semantics, and technicalities, all to justify the unjustifiable, to defend an entity that couldn't care less about you. To anyone making these arguments, you deserve better than what you're getting. But who knows, maybe Bethesda is going to try to weasel their way out of this using the same arguments. So let's dig a little deeper. The term DLC should be easy to define. It's an abbreviation for downloadable content. Simple. Well, it was until a few years ago when developers wanted to distinguish between DLC and microtransactions. Now, you can probably figure out why they'd want to do that, but what matters here is that any definition of DLC beyond its basic meaning is a contrivance of the game industry for its own convenience. Through the clever use of corporate newspeak, we're already starting this conversation on an uneven playing field. But sure, I'll accept that the goalposts have been moved to the point where microtransactions and DLC are two different things. Fine. That being said, I don't think anyone would argue that a bundle of items, private servers that allow for solo play, quality of life improvements that probably should have been in the game to begin with, qualify as a microtransaction. So even if we're willing to accept that microtransactions aren't being included in Pete's quote, everything else is, whether it's DLC or whatever you think this is. In short, it doesn't matter if Fallout First fits our shaky definition of a DLC or not. It's definitely not a cosmetic microtransaction, so it should be free. The second argument I got in that thread was about the definition of content. According to these people, none of the features in Fallout First should be considered content at all. This argument is particularly bizarre, because it suggests that because the features in Fallout First aren't important enough to qualify as content, that it's okay to charge for them. Essentially, because they're giving us less, it's okay for them to charge us more. What? But just for completion's sake, let's take a look at the definition of content. Now, there's two meanings that relate to our discussion. Something contained within something else, or something of substance. If we're willing to accept that virtual goods and services can be considered content at all, which Pete Hines seems to, then this meets the first definition. These virtual items and features are contained within the Fallout First package, therefore they are content. Now, the second definition is the most hazy, and it's the crux of the argument I keep seeing. To these people, nothing in Fallout First qualifies as substantial. To them, it's meaningless fluff. It doesn't actually matter, and therefore, it's not content. Well, that's entirely subjective, not to mention irrelevant. It doesn't matter how substantial something is, only if it's of substance. The fact that these features and items exist, virtually or not, means they have substance. Therefore, they can be considered content. But let's get out of this philosophical rabbit hole we've dug for ourselves. If your best argument revolves around obviously deceptive linguistic technicalities that effectively allow companies to do whatever they want, then it's probably not a good argument. What's especially baffling about this is that they've already pulled a Darth Vader once. Remember when they claimed that microtransactions would be cosmetic only, and that the only reason they existed was so everything else would be free? Yeah, they altered the deal. And they got away with it. So I hate to be an armchair lawyer, but I have to wonder, how much of this is even legal? I mean, at the very least, this is blatantly unethical. Bethesda spread this false information in an attempt to sell their game. Isn't that the literal definition of false advertising? I feel like consumers tend to assume that because a company did something openly, it can't be illegal. I mean, why would they do it in the first place if they could get in trouble for it? Because they know people will assume that. I've said this for years, but the laws around gaming and the internet are like the Wild West. No one's looking over here. No one has anyone's back. The fucking sheriffs probably grew up in the actual Wild West. They're too old to know what a video game is, let alone how the law applies to them. Meanwhile, the Bethesda gang is stealing our hooch and no one wants to wake up Sheriff Trump because we're terrified he's gonna shoot us all. Okay, I may have gotten lost in that metaphor, but the point stands. Illegal or not, we definitely need to get a statement from Pete Hines on this. Knowing him, it'll be dismissive and passive-aggressive, but they need to explain this. After all the gaffes and lies and fucking health scares, I'd be surprised if he couldn't at least get a refund, or a chargeback from the bank, or a report to the Better Business Bureau on this. Oh, and before anyone tries to say the terms of service allow them to do whatever they want, we've talked about this before. Most European countries agree that contracts can't exploit the consumer or take away your right to legal action, and even in the US, this is considered a legal gray area. There's no easy way out for Bethesda here, but one thing I know for certain is that nothing will change unless we do something. It's easy to point and laugh at Bethesda's countless screw-ups this year. But at this point, that laughter is a shield from actual consequences. Sure, Bethesda's gone from the plucky masterminds with their quirky games to the laughingstock of the industry. But in both phases of their reputation, we've laughed off their problems and moved on. That's how we got to this point. Bethesda clearly knows they can get away with this. If anything, they've been liberated by the destruction of their reputation. Laughing has gotten us nowhere. So what else can we do? What do you guys think? Does anyone out there have any legal experience? If so, let us know your opinion on all this. As for everyone else, what are your thoughts? Do you think this is all okay? Am I just whining over nothing? If you agree with me, what should we do about this? Let me know in the comments. But yeah, that was just something that was on my mind. Hey guys, Trip here. If you liked that video, why not watch some more? Hit that like button and make sure to share this video on Reddit and social media. Have you ever wanted to wear my face like a grizzly pelt? Well, check out Rage On. There you'll find all sorts of psychotrip merchandise to satisfy your grim needs. If you want more psychotrip, check out my Patreon. There you'll find all of my videos, as well as articles I've written for Comicsverse. If you like what you see, think about donating $1 or $2. You know, I was just using that apple pie moonshine pick for a gag, but I actually really want to try it now. Seriously, if you toss me a few bucks, I'm going to get some. I'll let you know what I think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.